We've been discussing the practice of Four Noble Truths. Four Satipatthana, mindfulness, practice of mindfulness. Whoever does not practice Satipatthana will be deviated from the practice of the noble part of 8 constituents, which amounts to Pamada. On the other hand, whoever practices Satipatthana to the full extent will be tantamount to practicing or accomplishing the noble part of 8 constituents, which means which leads to Appamada, diligence or vigilance. This subject is discussed because they are related. That's why we also discussed what are things to abstain and what are things to observe. Things to be abstained are the 10 kinds of immoral deeds, ducharitas in Pali. And things to be observed are sucharita, moral deeds or wholesome deeds, which are also of 10 kinds. If one fails to abstain from these 10 ducharitas, immoral deeds, then one will be Pamada. If one does not fail to abstain from these 10 immoral deeds, because one is diligent or vigilant, this will be tantamount to Appamada. This is very important. In order to be a real good human being, understanding them, first of all, one has to understand what are to be abstained, what are to be observed, and then undertake the practice. Knowing that the immoral deeds are despicable, fearful, one abstains from them. And also one should know that the consequences of such immoral deeds are unwholesome, despicable. One should despise it, one should detest it, one should be afraid of it. Then one should abstain from committing these things. As for sucharitas, moral deeds, they bring about wholesome consequences, and having faith in it, we undertake this practice. Then, if we fail, we will be Pamada, and if we do not fail, we will be Appamada. As simple as that. If one understands this basically and undertake the practice, then one will be a real good person. In the text, I mentioned these 2 things, Pamada and Appamada, but it does not be mentioned how many kinds of Pamada and Appamada are there in numbers. However, according to the Buddha's discourses, there are roughly 3 kinds, namely gross, medium and refined, both for Pamada and Appamada. As for gross form of Pamada, negligence, not abstaining what should be abstained, namely not abstaining from committing or observing, or not abstaining from ducharitas, immoral deeds, failing to abstain from immoral deeds, forgetting them, neglecting them, such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, malicious talk, harsh speech, meaningless talk, covetousness, ill will, wrong view. Wrong view, not believing good, that good becomes good and bad becomes bad, karma and karma result. So that one's physical, verbal, mental behaviors become wild and violent, and one does not detest or fear Dukkha-ritas, immoral deeds, not knowing them in advance that they are unwholesome, and even if one knows, one does not practice with the concept of hiri otapa, moral shame, moral fear, or spiritual shame, spiritual fear. Such is the gross form of Pamada. Conversely, if one abstains from doing these immoral deeds, then one is said to be Appamada, diligence, vigilance. This is gross form of Appamada. As simple as that. If you can just remember, failing is Pamada, or negligence is Pamada, and diligence or vigilance is Appamada. We have human responsibility to abstain from what should be abstained and observe what should be observed. Even when we are confronted with a situation where we are just thrown into a situation where we might commit some immoral deeds, then we purposely abstain from committing this immoral deed. Then one will not be defiled, at the same time others will not be harmed. Such is a good practice. If we do the practice once, twice, thrice, many times, then it becomes a good habit, and we should accumulate such habits into a good practice. We are duty bound to observe this duty, and we should sustain this practice. As much as we sustain, we are uplifting ourselves. At the same time, others are saved, others are safeguarded. So we need to observe what should be observed. And if we continue to do that, make it a good habit, this becomes a basic human duty. Not failing to observe what should be observed, not failing to neglect what should be observed, then it becomes a good habit. We have to be mindful of that, careful of that. That will be Appamada, and if we do not do that, it will be Pamada. So to remember is to simply remember is when it comes to abstaining, what should we abstain? If we are diligent, if we are diligent in abstaining, then it will be Appamada, and if we are negligent, this will be Pamada. And when it comes to observing, if we do not fail to observe what should be observed, then it will be Appamada, and if we fail or neglect or forget to observe what should be observed, this will be Pamada. In the text is given this saying: indulging oneself, leaving the mind uncontrolled, not even a small amount, as regards these unwholesome deeds. Suppose you make a small mistake once, and instead of having a sense of urgency with fear, you still go on doing it, committing mistakes one after another without restraint, leaving the mind uncontrolled. This is Pamada. Where does the mind where does one indulge oneself, or in which aspect is one's mind uncontrolled? In respect of the Dukkha-ritas, 3 physical, immoral deeds, 4 verbal immoral deeds, and 3 mental immoral deeds. Altogether 10. So one does not, instead of restraining oneself, one's mind is not controlled, one does not control oneself in respect of these immoral deeds. If at times one may commit something, for instance killing, and if one does not practice the restraint of this immoral deed without any shame and fear, then this is the gross form of Pamada. You are failing in human duty towards the society. On the other hand, if you practice restraint, controlling yourself, not indulging yourself, and even if you make one mistake at one time, you restrain yourself, you remember it with a sense of urgency, and you correct yourself and practice the restraint, then this will be Appamada. This is what the Buddha has said. Again, the difference between Pamada and Appamada. As for Pamada, one does not control oneself, leaving the mind uncontrolled, unrestrained, then failing in the duty towards the society. Instead of helping others, you're harming others. On the other hand, knowing that such things are despicable, you restrain yourself, control yourself so that you are not defiled, then at the same time others also will be safeguarded. It amounts to sympathetic feeling towards others, in which case you are sustaining the human responsibility, human duty, with the practice of moral shame and moral fear. So you practice moral shame and moral fear towards yourself, with being ashamed and fearful of doing unwholesome things. You restrain yourself, at the same time you are safeguarding others. In short, if you commit unwholesome deeds, then this will be Pamada, and if you have sympathetic feeling and practice of restraint, this is Appamada.
ကိုယ်စိတ်ကြိုက်ဖြစ်တဲ့ဉာဏ်လို့တဲ့ချစ်ခင်စရာကောင်းတဲ့အလေးပြုရတဲ့အစင်အတန်အနတ်အရသာအထီးတွေပေါ်နေတယ်အဲ့ဒါကြီးပါဠိလိုကာမကုဏလို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်လူကျင်စရာလည်းဖြစ်တယ်အဲ့ဒီလူကျင်စရာတွေလူတွေမျက်မှောကြတော့လူကျင်စရာအရာဝတ္ထုတွေကမျက်မှောတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကိုမလွတ်ရအောင်လို့နှုတ်ဖွဲ့ထားတယ်လည်းဖြစ်တာမလို့ကုဏလို့လည်းခေါ်တယ်လူကျင်ပွယ်ရလူလာတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေကိုနှုတ်ဖွဲ့ကြောင်းနှုတ်ဖွဲ့တတ်တဲ့တရားဟုတ်တယ်စိတ်ဆရာကြီးအာရုံတွေမှာကပ်ပြီဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့ဒီအာယုံကကြိုက်နေတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကိုခွာလို့မရအောင်ဒီခါလေးသူကတော့ဖွက်တုပ်ချီထားတော့တယ်ဒီမှာအဲ့လိုသဘောရှိပါတယ်ဒီအဲ့ဒါပါဠိလိုကာမကုဏလို့ခေါ်ပါတယ်
Such is the gross form of Pamada and Appamada. Now we come to the medium form of Pamada and Appamada. It is concerned with sensual pleasures, Kama Guna. There are 5 causes of sensual pleasures. Objects of seeing, visible object, objects of hearing, objects, the taste, objects of taste, and objects of smell, then tangible objects, objects of touch, which are desirable objects, known as Kama Guna. Since the desirable objects tend to bind the person who desires them, it is known as Guna. It is binding, tying up. It is quite correct. When one desires something, this becomes an object of passion, and this object tends to bind the person concerned. Hence the name Kama Guna. When one sees a visible object, especially a desirable one, attractive one, then one tends to want it, want to get it, or want to see it, and one does not wish to get away from this visible object. One will go on wanting to see it. As much as this visible object is attractive, then one will be more and more desirous. The same goes with sound or the voice. When the sound of the voice is desirable, pleasant, and attractive, it is bound to bind the hearer or the listener. Same thing with smell. If the smell is good, as much as the smell is good, it can bind the person who likes this smell. And when it comes to taste, as the food is tasty, as much as the food is tasty, then this will always desire, and this will bind the person who desires it. And also the tangible object, the thing which touches the body, as much as this tangible object is attractive and desirable, it will bind that person. It will be attracted to the person, so that the person will not wish to go without it, to get away from it. You can imagine it from your own personal experience. Such is the meaning of Kama Guna. Again, Kama Guna is of two kinds. Kama is of two kinds, namely Vatu Kama and Kilesa Kama. Vatu Kama, objective defilement, something which is desirable, such as a pleasant visible object, a beautiful visible object, a pleasant smell, and so on. These things are known as Vatu Kama, objective defilement. And we have this Kilesa Kama, subjective defilement, is Tatna, wanting it, desiring it. So this Vatu Kama tends to bind the person, become attractive, tends to attract the person who desires this Vatu Kama. So this also you can imagine from your own personal experience. To make it simple, when it comes to a desirable object, one will wish to see it if it's a visible object. One will wish to smell it if it's a desirable odor. One will wish to listen to it if it's a desirable sound or voice. One will wish to taste it or eat it if it's a tasty object, and one will wish to touch it if it's a desirable, tangible object. And this is Kilesa Kama, subjective defilement. And when it comes to this sense of pleasures, sense objects, 5 causes of sense of pleasure or sense objects, when one enjoys such things, then there's a sense of well-being and happiness, and such is Kama Guna Sukha or Kama Sukha, sense pleasures, happiness of sense. Some people, though they do not fail to abstain from debauchery, immoral deeds, committing immoral deeds, when it comes to sensual pleasures, 5 causes of sensual pleasures, Kama Guna, they leave their mind uncontrolled. They indulge in them, in sensual pleasures. For them, as sentient beings, they consider this as natural to enjoy sense objects. with Kamatana, attachment, wishing to see good things, pleasurable objects, wishing to hear pleasant sound, and so on, and wishing to see better and better visible object, more and more beautiful object, more and more pleasant sound, listening to more and more pleasant sound, and so on, in an insatiable manner, so that they don't get satisfied. And in this way, they while their time, they spend their life by enjoying these 5 causes of sensual pleasures, leaving their mind uncontrolled, indulging in them, not knowing how to practice the restraint with mindfulness, leaving the mind uncontrolled, not knowing that restraint is good, not realizing that restraint is purity, restraint is kusala, wholesome, forgetting them. As much as one forgets, one will fail to practice the restraint, and this is Pamada. As much as one fails or neglects, one fails to abstain from debaucheries with mindfulness, one also forgets or fails or neglects to practice the restraint of one's own mind as regards the 5 causes of sensual pleasures, such as failing, negligence, and Pamada. If one practices the restraint as much as one can, then this will be Appamada. Now this is true especially for monks and yogis. They should be content with whatever they have or are given. Contentment is good, satisfaction is good. This is santokti. It's a noble thing, a good thing. If one is not satisfied or never content with anything one is given, then there will be always wanting, and there will be no end to it. Leaving the mind uncontrolled as regards the 5 causes of sensual pleasures, there will be more and more wants. And of course, from ordinary wanting to more and more, much more desires, greed, and so on. And if we expand on this subject, there's much to talk about. For those who are not free from this kilesa karma, subjective defilements, they become servant to Tanna, as is given in the expression Uno Loko Adalido Tanna Daso. For Loko means all beings. All beings are wanting and wanting. There is no end to their wants. And however much their want is fulfilled, there is no end to it, so that they become Tanna Daso, servant of Tanna or craving. So that one becomes intoxicated with 5 causes of sensual pleasures, leading to deadly pleasures or fatal happiness. One should practice the restraint, especially as regards those sense objects which do not belong to oneself, or even if the sense object belongs to oneself, one should be able to practice the restraint, not to leave the mind uncontrolled and indulge oneself. So then only you'll be able to realize peace and happiness which excels manifold the sense restraint. As for unavoidable sense objects as sentient beings, it may be all right, but for those which should be avoidable things, one should practice the restraint. As much as one practice the restraint, if one leaves one's mind uncontrolled, indulge oneself as regards the 5 causes of sensual pleasures, then this amounts to the practice of medium form of Pamada, negligence, failing to practice the restraint which leads to purity and wholesomeness. If on the other hand one does not leave the mind uncontrolled as regards the 5 causes of sensual pleasures and practice the restraint as much as possible as regards the sensual pleasures, then it amounts to Appamada, negligence, diligence or vigilance. Now, restraining, with the practice of restraint, one forgoes, to some extent, one forgoes the kama sukha, sense pleasure, sense happiness, not being attracted to it, not going after it. By so doing, do we sustain complete loss? The answer is no. Because by foregoing this sense of worldly happiness, one can realize the kind of happiness which excels manifold this worldly or sense happiness. One can come to possess this kind of happiness. So, what kind of happiness can one attain? Nekama sukha, such as jhana sukha, the happiness of absorption, mundane absorption, the happiness of being a monk, monkhood, happiness of the practice of vipassana, insight, and finally the happiness of attaining the ultimate peace of nibbana. So as regards the loss of worldly pleasures, it is insignificant, nothing compared to the spiritual happiness. If one thinks that these sensual pleasures are good, really good, then one is bound to this kind of happiness is deadly happiness, or fatal happiness, happiness which can lead to death and harm and danger. So if you can, by foregoing this worldly happiness, you can realize the kind of spiritual happiness which excels manifold, that is nekama sukha parikaha, that is grasping or possessing this happiness of liberation, of renunciation. And when one comes to possess this, whatever one possesses, or whatever belongs to oneself, can be used as much as one likes. So, this kama sukha, loss of kama sukha, is insignificant, because you can get the happiness which excels manifold, this worldly happiness. Understanding this, at least during the practice, these yogis should be able to practice the restraint of the sensual pleasures as much as there's a difference between the ordinary person who is not practicing satipatthana and yogis who are practicing satipatthana. Both come into contact with 5 causes of sensual pleasures in one way or another, but there is a difference. As for ordinary person who is not practicing satipatthana, they leave their mind uncontrolled. They do not practice restraint as regards sensual pleasures, so there is no limit to them in their desires, and there's more and more craving. This craving flows like a current, continuously, as regards desirable objects, and they go in pursuit of these desirable objects without end. When tanha arises, craving arises, there is lobha, greed. As for the practitioner, they also come into contact with sense objects. They see objects, they hear, they smell, they taste, they touch. But since they are mindful, this mindfulness does not cause kilesa karma, that is subjective defilement. Not craving for these desirable objects, thinking that they are desirable, they are good. So the coming into contact is the same, seeing is the same, hearing is the same, tasting, touching is the same, but there is a difference. The difference between these two as regards craving and non-craving. Craving, indulgence and restraint. So although the yogis, practitioners come into contact with virtue karma, they do not experience kilesa karma, subjective defilement, that is craving. Again, as for the same ordinary person and yogis, when they see beautiful object, they both see the beautiful object. It is the same. There is a feeling, same feeling, ordinary feeling. Yogi also feels it, experiences it, The experiences are the same, or seeing experience is the same. In the case of just seeing, this is neither kusala nor akusala. Just seeing. Seeing is just seeing, mere seeing. Neither wholesome nor unwholesome, it is neutral. Those who leave the mind uncontrolled, indulging in sensual pleasures, pardon me, they will crave for better and better objects, leading to tanha and the pursuit of tanha, leading to from craving to clinging, from craving to clinging. So as for the yogi, in connection with the object seen, there is no tanha, no craving, because yogi is mindful. Yogi is practicing mindfulness in order to do away with kilesa, such as craving, tanha, or at least weaken them, and just to weaken them and do away with tanha. So yogi is always practicing to be free from tanha, and as much as they are mindful, they are free from this craving. As is given Vedana Pachayatana, with Vedana, with sensation as a condition, there arises this tanha, craving. With sensation or feeling as condition, there arises craving or attachment. So this craving, because of this feeling, there is craving. Feeling leads to craving or attachment. Now, because yogis are mindful, with the practice of mindfulness, restraint of their mind, this thing does not happen. Vedana does not lead to tanha. Sensation or feeling does not lead to attachment or craving. In place of craving or tanha, tanha is replaced by sati and panya, mindfulness and wisdom. Or mindfulness and wisdom take the place of craving, so that from feeling, the tanha does not follow. When there is no tanha, no craving, there will not be no If one does not practice the restraint of sense of as regards sense pleasures, without mindfulness and panya, then this amounts to Pamada, leading to Kama Sukhalika Nuyoga. One, there cannot arise any kilesa kama. In this way, abstaining one with this practice, with this restraint, with the practice of sati, mindfulness, one overcomes this one extreme, or one does not reach the extreme of Kama Sukhalika Niyoga, that is extreme of sense indulgence. If one leaves the mind uncontrolled and indulges in sense pleasures, then this will amount to Kama Sukhalika Niyoga, sense indulgence. And instead, if one practices Satipatthana, practicing the restraint with mindfulness, then one is free from this extreme. When once you are able to practice mindfulness continuously, cultivating concentration and knowledge with maturity of insight knowledge, reaching the stage of satisfactoriness and maturity, whenever one comes into contact with desirable objects such as visible objects, sound, pleasant sound, voice and so on, there will not arise any craving. You will be free from tanha, craving, in a wonderful manner. So at that time, you will be free from one extreme of Kama Sukhalika Nuyoga, sense indulgence. Yogis are, in the course of the practice, they taking food in a moderate way, as much as they need. They wear clothes as much as they need, and they can stay in their kutis as much as they can do, and they take medicines now and again as they need, and they can regulate or adjust the heat and cold, and balance their postures, iryapatha. In this way, they are not tormenting their bodies, although it is quite hot these days. They are not tormenting. They are not doing it by themselves. It is the weather which is doing it. It is not you who is doing it. So you are not ill-treating or tormenting your body by hitting yourself. So you are getting free from one extreme of Adakila Matthana Yoga, one extreme of self-mortification. So you walk in the path of the middle path, Majjhima Patipada, free from two extremes. So even if yogis are seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, there's no Kama Sukha, they are not desirous of, they are not enjoying sense of pleasures in the sense of enjoyment. That means no Kama Sukhalika Nuyoga, extreme of sense enjoyment. And because they are noting whatever arises in their mind and body, they are free from this extreme of sense indulgence. So whenever they eat in a moderate way, and clothing, they wear clothes in a moderate way, and so on. While they are doing it, they are also mindful. They are mindful of eating, drinking, and so on. So that there is no Kama-tanha arising in their mind. They are free from Kama-tanha, craving for sense objects, because they are mindful. then noting them off. And also at the same time, they are not ill-treating, they are not tormenting their body in a harsh way. Because they are looking after their body, taking care of their body. In this way, they are free from sense indulgence. They are free from self-modification. They are in the middle. They are practicing the middle path. Hence, this is called Majjhima, the middle of the two extremes. Hence, this is the path of since this is the path, this is now the Patipada, or path of the practice. It is Patipada, hence the Majjhima Patipada. So here they are practicing mindfulness. They are practicing the middle way, free from two extremes, in a very straight path, straight middle path. It is quite commendable. We talk about middle way theoretically, and we read about this in books. This is only theoretical knowledge. Now you all are practicing the middle way. In essence, yogis are practicing so as not to torment their body, so that they are not wearisome, they are not wearied, taking food as they should do, wearing clothes as they should, and so on, balancing their iriyabhata postures, four postures. And then even when they are using these materials like food, clothing and things like that, they are always mindful. They sustain mindfulness. Therefore, as regards desirable object, there cannot arise any craving, tanha. Therefore, at least when during the practice of mindfulness, you are realizing peace. And when it comes to any objects that you use, you are mindful so that there is no tanha. If you are not mindful, then you may crave, but because you are mindful, there is no craving, no tanha. Similarly, you may come into contact or experience undesirable objects, especially when you are practicing sitting meditation. You are bound to experience excruciating pain, unbearable sensations and so on. And on that occasion also there can arise tanha. How? As it said, dukkha sukham patayati. That means this suffering leads to craving for happiness or pleasure. The dukkha, suffering, because you are suffering, you crave for some ease or comfort to overcome this suffering. Because you are experiencing excruciating sensations in the body when you are sitting, you are wishing that it may go away, you may feel comfortable, you are craving or longing for some better, pleasant sensations. That is tanha. So in this way, tanha arises from your suffering. So, with the practice of satipatthana, even if you experience undesirable objects, you activate your mindfulness, then you are bound to cultivate knowledge, then there will not arise any tanha because of vedana. Or vedana as condition, there cannot arise any tanha. Instead of tanha, there will arise There is sati and panya, mindfulness and wisdom. Mindfulness and wisdom will take the place of tanha when you experience sensations. So, in this way, you'll be able to overcome the undesirable objects like heat and excruciating sensations, and this is your gain. The gain means you are gaining sati and panya instead of tanha. As for beings, whenever they experience undesirable things, or experience undesirable objects, see undesirable visible objects and so on, they are not happy, they dislike it, leading to dosa, anger, ill will, and so on. On that occasion, you need to be able to practice mindfulness, so that mindfulness takes the priority. Mindfulness and awareness takes the priority. When you experience undesirable things, you may also long for desirable things, good things. So when you experience pain or undesirable sensations, then you note as soon as you see, hear, taste, touch and so on, with the practice of Satipatthana. Just rush your noting mind towards that object to be noted, so that sati takes the priority, sati takes the upper hand with vigilance in a timely manner. If Satipatthana, sati does not take the priority, then as regards undesirable objects, there will arise this anger, ill will, dissatisfaction, which will be without any end. So you also will long for better sensations, better things. That also amounts to tanha. In this way, you are overcome, you are invaded by these defilements, lobha, dosa, greed and hatred. So as soon as it arises, whether it's good or bad, you note it, be aware of it, so that there will be no delusion. Because if you don't note, then there will be unknowing. Unknowing means delusion. You become deluded. Therefore, you should note it and know it. If you don't know, you tend to cling. If you know, you are free from clinging. That is the maximum. So with the sati, you should be able to, sati should take the priority, so that you can purify your mind. And in this way, yogis should strive on to practice mindfulness. And Sayadaw exhorts you to be vigilant. That's all for today.